Last week we talked about Abraham and Isaac and just what an incredible moment that was with a father and a son and the offering up of a promise to God, not holding on too tightly to the things that God blesses us with, being open-handed with those things and trusting Him in the process. It was just a deeply encouraging morning for myself, and today is going to be equally as good because we're talking about blood. Now, to give a little bit of history on where we find ourselves, the children of Israel, I feel like at different points we've landed on this portion of Scripture, landing at different aspects of it, but where we are right now is the children of Israel have been enslaved by the Egyptians for 400 years. There is a new ideology, there is a slave mentality, a bound mentality that they live in, that they walk in, and they've been doing that for generation after generation after generation after generation. And there's a very unlikely candidate that God selects. He actually killed one of the Egyptian soldiers because he realized that he was one of the children of Israel. He was a Hebrew, and he tried to handle matters in his own, and he killed an Egyptian soldier. He flees, goes away. God speaks to him partway through his life and says, hey, you're going to go back and deliver the people that you ran from. And he comes back, and I don't know what his expectations were, but we find that when Moses comes back to confront Pharaoh, which, by the way, was his stepbrother, the stepbrother, that just didn't go very well. And we have this moment where there are plagues that are being poured out. And some people are confused by the plagues, and they'll ask questions about these portions of Scripture, saying, how can a loving God make these things happen? And they forget the bigger narrative, the fact that the children of Israel have been enslaved for 400 years. And so God is a just God. And so there are purposeful reasons behind everything that has taken place behind all of these 10 plagues. All of them confront the pride of Pharaoh. Pharaoh would tout that he himself was a deity, and so when he couldn't control the things that were happening to the land and to the people and around the area, it was a shot to his ego. And so we see these different plagues being poured out, and all of them chipping their way at the image of Pharaoh. And we get to this point where we're on the 10th and final plague, and it's a pretty big one, where it's the death of the firstborn. And we're going to pick up our reading in Exodus chapter 11. We're going to spend most of our time in Exodus 12, but this in chapter 11 kind of sets the stage for our morning. 10 also, it's important that we understand that there's purpose and intentionality behind everything that God does. And so we have 10 plagues, and 7 and 10 both represent perfection, and so God's perfect judgment is being poured out on the Egyptians because they just weren't wanting to let the people go. So we're going to jump through a couple verses in chapter 11, then spend most of our time in chapter 12. It says this in verse 3, the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and the man Moses was highly regarded in the land of Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and the people. So by now, after some of these plagues have been being poured out, some of these people are kind of like, okay, he's legit. And not only is he legit, his God is legit. And so we have regard for him. He's proving everything. Everything that he says is going to happen, it happens. And so he was highly regarded. So then Moses says this is verse 4. This is what Yahweh says, about midnight I will go throughout Egypt, and every firstborn male in the land of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the firstborn of the servant girl who is behind the millstones, as well as every firstborn of the livestock. There will be a great cry of anguish through all the land of Egypt, such as never was before or ever will be again. But again, all the Israelites, whether man or beast, not even a dog, will snarl, so that you may know that your so that you'll know that Yahweh makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. It's important for us to know right out of the gate that the moment you step into a life of God being for you, which He's always for you, but once we grab a hold of that, it's called a relationship with Him, you need to know that He does a distinguishing work in you. And this event that is going to take place for this last plague, it was to ultimately and overtly, undeniably set the children of Israel apart. Period. All these officials of yours will come down to me and bow before me, saying, "Leave, you and all the people who follow you. After that, I will leave." And he left Pharaoh's presence in fierce anger. The Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt." Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his land. We have just set the stage for this last night. And the way that the rest of these, in chapter 12, the way it works, or the way it's written, is there is verbiage that's kind of written in a way of like, this is what you need to continue doing in the years to come. What's going to take place tonight? Keep doing this throughout your generations so that y'all will continue to hold on to what is about to happen here. You won't forget. Do this so that you won't forget. Does that sound familiar to a meal that anybody had with some people? Do this in remembrance. Do this so that you will not forget. What is about to take place in the land of Egypt is going to be something that is not forgettable. Or so we would think. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month is to be the beginning of months for you." This event created a new calendar for them. "It is the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they must select a lamb or goat of the flock according to their father's households, one animal per household. If the household is too small for the whole lamb, that person and the neighbor nearest his house are to select one based on the combined number of people. You should apportion the lamb according to what each person will eat. You must have an unblemished lamb, a year-old male, so that you may take it from either the sheep or the goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of this month." It doesn't say this, but I'm pretty sure he would have said, "Don't name it," because you can't kill what you name. But anyways, then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animals at twilight. They must take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses where they eat them. They are to eat the meat that night. They should eat it roasted over fire along with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or uncooked or boiled in water, but only roasted over fire. Its head as well as its legs and inner organs. Do not let any of it remain until morning. You must burn up any part of it that does remain before the morning. And so here's how you must eat it. This is what you need to be prepared for. You must be dressed for travel, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in a hurry. Go against everything your mom and grandma told you. Eat it in a hurry. It is the Lord's Sabbath. It is the Lord's Passover. I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night and strike every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. I am Yahweh. I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. The blood on the houses where you are staying will be a distinguishing mark for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No plague will be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Now I'm going to skip verses 14 through 20. We're going to pick back up in 21. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go, select an animal, select a lamb from the flock according to your families, and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a cluster of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and brush the lintel and the 2 doorposts with some of the blood in the basin. None of you may go out of the door of his house until morning. When the Lord passes through to strike Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, he will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you. Keep this command permanently as a statute for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you, as he promised, you are to observe this ritual. When your children ask you, 'What does this ritual mean to you?' you are to reply, 'It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. For he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck down the Egyptians and spared our homes.' So the people bowed down and worshiped. Then the Israelites went and did this. They did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron." That is a lot of reading, but here's the key words that we want to pick up on. Covered, spared, favored. Be 3 good words for you to write down and get those etched in your noggins for the rest of your life. Covered, spared, favored. We have this traumatic event that is about to take place, and we have the instructions for the evening. And they might seem bizarre, but yet so did Abraham and Isaac. In that whole scene, it seemed a bit bizarre. We have the central focus being blood. Blood that was not discarded, but blood that had a purpose. Blood that was not just trampled on, but blood that was held in high regard. A 1-year-old, healthy male lamb is what they had to go out and find. And upon slaughtering it, they were to catch some of its blood in a basin. And see, when I go through stories like this and I think about where we are today versus where they were then, I think about how cordial we've become. I think about how polished and how clean we've become in our relationship with God. And don't get me wrong, I'm thankful that we don't have to have a staff member that watches over all of our lambs and goats to make sure they're healthy so that we can sacrifice every Sunday. I'm not saying that I want to bring that stuff back. We don't need to do that anymore. I'm just saying there's a messiness and an intensity and an in-your-face, undeniable kind of, like blood is being poured out, and it's intense. Not only that, but they're cooking this animal over fire. There's aroma, and there's all the senses. There's the sounds of even slaughtering the animal. All of these different things might make some of y'all's stomachs turn, but that was regular, normal. We've gotten polished in our faith. Go out and find one of those lambs. There was a very clear directive on what to do. And I imagine that night, not all the children of Israel were old. I mean, you think about the young ones that were taking this scene in. They hadn't done this in a long, long time. Where did Dad go? Where did Grandpa go? Oh, they went out to get a lamb or goat. I don't know, whatever they're going to come back with. And then so they're just taking the scene in, right? And there's something that we miss in our walk with Christ. If we understand this, if we understand that He is the sacrificial lamb. There is an understanding that we're supposed to walk in that we miss a lot of our life. This type of living where we are covered. I mean, it might sound like old school church up in here when I say this, but to walk like we're covered in the blood, right? There's a different way that we would go about our decisions and go about our days if we lived like we were truly covered by the blood of the Lamb, as if we lived like we were covered by the blood of Christ. And so I just playing this out. Now, don't worry, everything that I'm going to use is paint. It's not real blood. But I'm just thinking about the little ones that have seen their relatives live as slaves their whole life. And then this man named Moses, who everything that he says will happen, happens. And they're obscure things like frogs and gnats and darkness and things like blood in the water, all of these different things. And what he says will happen, God makes them happen. And now we have this night where there's a lamb in our house. And Dad is putting its blood in this basin. Now, just for clarity, the parts of the door, I know what doorposts are. I just didn't know that this is the lintel. And so it is a complete covering. That was the instruction. And so obviously they didn't have a door as nice as this with glass and everything in it. But Moses and Aaron send out word to go do these things. And the instructions were, listen, you need to put it over the doorposts and the lintel, and then you will be covered. And so they go out and they bring the animal, they bring the lamb or the goat, and they slaughter it. And they begin to wipe it on the doorposts and the lintel. And again, I'm thankful that it's quiet in here so that we can hear. So that we can hear this. Covering has a sound to it. And so they're watching their dad cover the lintels and the doorposts. And they're like, well, now what? Well, according to Abraham, or not Abraham, throwing out all kinds of names. According to Moses and Aaron, we need to stay inside. We need to stay inside. So, fortunately, these doors are screwed shut, so you guys can't come out. What powerful imagery this is, though. That the sides and the top are covered. And there's, if you think about, it says this, that when the Lord goes through the land and he passes through all of the homes that are marked like this, the destroyer won't go in. And so it needs to be all. And I almost wonder, it doesn't say this, but I almost wonder if some were half-hearted in their execution here and didn't cover everything. What happened? We don't know. But you cover everything. The doorway can be parallel to our mind, can be parallel to our heart. And so, see, when we say yes to Jesus, when we say yes to what he has done, that his blood poured out, literally every aspect of our life, our heart, our mind, our soul, is covered by the blood of the Lamb. Our challenge is to live a life where we remain covered. In this story, they don't live here, they spend the night here. But on this side of the door, on this side of the door, there's life. On the other side of the door, that's where death is. That's where destruction is. And what's required, just by simply spelling this out, what's required for me to be here is simple faith and simple obedience. Trust. Trust that this blood on the peripheral, on the parameters of this door is going to do what He said it's going to do. And so what that, on the most basic level, means that for those that didn't do this, and for those that lived on this side of the door, they doubted. They took matters in their own hands. They were skeptics. And the end result was weeping and wailing at the loss of their firstborn. Death on this side of the door. There's something undeniably powerful about being covered by the blood. And not only covered, it being over you, but you being in it. Because in order for me to truly be covered, I've got to be in the house. Now that's not a church plug. I'm just saying you've got to be in where He tells you to be in. And you need to be behind the door that He's saying to be behind. What else is on the other side of that door? Well, if we bring it into today's verbiage, today's world, bitterness is on that side of the door. You see, if you really walked a life where you're covered by the blood, you wouldn't walk in bitterness anymore. You're covered by the blood. You're in it. You don't hold on to those things. See, they could have been bitter about being slaves for 400 years. What do you mean put blood on the door? I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. We're here. If God was truly powerful, then He would have handled this sooner than for 400 years. Any number of things on the other side of this door. Unforgiveness, bitterness, doubt. You might even have the words of others. The mocking people are on the other side of this door. But you know what? I don't care what's on the other side of that door, because I'm covered by the blood and I'm in it where He's told me to be in it. They spend one night. And I almost wonder what the young ones thought when they came out and they see the dried remnants of the doorposts, and they come out of their place, and I almost imagine these alleyways where there's just doorways lined up both ways, and these young ones coming out, and they see most of the doorposts covered in blood. And the ones that aren't, you hear immense wailing and devastation, because they chose not to be under the blood. It goes on to say that this is the distinguishing mark. This blood-slathered doorpost and lintel is the distinguishing mark for those who put their faith in God. The moment you say yes to Jesus, you are slathered in blood. And what's powerful about that is it doesn't matter how filthy, ugly, whatever your stuff is. When our heavenly Dad looks at us and we are painted red with the blood of Christ, all He sees is righteousness, purity, wholeness, Jesus. And what we are called to do is to live under and in the blood. I even wonder if some of them did, out of curiosity, open their doors early. You know, we don't have the privilege of those pieces of the story. But God is a God of, He pays attention to the details. And this life of living under the blood and living in the blood is a life where we are every day saying yes to Jesus. We're saying, yes, we want your sacrifice to cover me every day. Because every day I'm messed up. But every day I choose you. Moment by moment. Decision by decision. I trust you. I want you to paint me up with your blood, Jesus. And now as the story goes on, what takes place next is they wake up the next morning, and it's not only this street here, but they can hear it in far, far away places, this insane wailing and weeping coming out of the homes of those that did not do this. And by the way, it didn't exclude, there was no exclusion here. Anybody could have done this. But the hard-hearted ones obviously didn't. And there's just these waves of wailing. They go on, and it's spelled out where the Egyptians were so angry and so hurt by everything that they just told the Israelites, just get out of here. Go. Leave. And this is where the favor comes in. And later on in chapter 12, it goes to say this, that God gave the children of Israel such favor that they plundered the Egyptians. They walked out of this place. They walked out of slavery with a lot more than when they came into it. They had nothing in their hands at first, but then they walk out with everything they need because they had such favor. Y'all, it's not just a practical thing for today to be under the blood and in the place that He's called you to be. It's practical for the tomorrows to live in and under the blood. This should cause us to live different. You're not content with your job. It's okay. You're under the blood. God blesses you. God wants to honor you. He wants to give you strength and wisdom. He's going to provide for you. Don't worry about a job. He's got you. A broken relationship, don't worry about it. I'm not saying ignore it, and that's kind of dysfunctional, but what I'm saying is trust Him in it. You live under the blood. There's freedom, life, health, wholeness under the blood. So walk under the blood. For thousands of years following this, the children of Israel would do this. They would find an unblemished lamb. They would hold it in their home for 14 days. Feed it, dote on it, then they would slaughter it. Preserving some of its blood, wiping it on the doorposts. There was a specific meal that they would have. In a few weeks for Good Friday, we're going to find ourselves in a similar spot where we're watching Jesus and the disciples have this meal together that would ultimately lead to Jesus being the sacrificial lamb. But something doesn't change. There's one thing that doesn't change or shouldn't change. What shouldn't change is our faithfulness to the one who spilled out the blood. I don't know about you, but if somebody bleeds for me, you see these movies, right, where I love the soldier movie or the war movies where these teams of people will go to find this one person and they all lose their life so that he can continue to live. And always in these movies and in these stories, this individual wants to know that they lived a worthy life because they understood that people died for them. Sometimes I think that we approach the truth of the Word, the truth of what Jesus has done, as if it's just a storybook thing. As if it's just another felt board story. We lose sight of what He's done. If we can work our mind and our heart to the place where we understand that what He went through, He legitimately went through, we would live differently. We would live with the end in mind. We would live with the understanding that not just somebody, but the Son of the living God died for me. And even as I'm preaching this, it feels so elementary. Like, surely we would have gotten it by now. But I'm going to tell you, the longer I live, the more and more I want the truth of what He did to settle in my heart so that I will live unashamed, so that I will live undenying the truth of who He is, never shrinking back. What is required, though, is for me to be under the blood, living under the blood. And the favor that we can easily talk about is like His blessings and material stuff. But I think God's favor, when we're covered and when we are spared, we should anticipate and expect His favor. In this story, it was gold and silver and cloaks and garments and things. But I think there's something deeper. To live with an understanding that God's favor is on my life. No matter how things look, I'm favored. No matter a paycheck or no paycheck, I'm favored. No matter I have loyal friends or disloyal friends, I'm favored by God. Whether the doctor report is what I hope it would be or not what it would be, I'm favored by God. This morning, what I want to encourage you to do, if you've never done this, I keep coming back to this. I want you to grab the connection card. There's 3 questions. You can take a pick, or you can answer all of them. How has He covered you? How has He spared you? How has He favored you? I'm going to give a few minutes to respond to that, but then also today, some of you are looking at this and you're like, my goodness, I need to be there. I need to be covered. After I give you a few minutes, we're going to pray at the end, and we're just going to say, God, I want you to cover me. What you're saying by saying that is you're accepting Jesus' sacrifice and His blood that was poured out for you. You're receiving that.